The Afri-Cities Conference takes place in the city of Kisumu, and the work that needs to be done in the city of Kisumu. The question is, so how many cities do we now have in Kenya? We have Nairobi, Kisumu, Mombasa, Nakuru.
4.
Those 4. If we look at Nairobi and Mombasa, the oldest cities, look at Kisumu as well. Just the other day, the governor of Kisumu City was talking about we need to ease off land pressure here. So there are 2 schools. Yes, they are old schools. Yes, they have history behind them. Yes, but look, they are smack in the middle of the CBD. Can we move these schools out and then use this space for commercial purposes? And there was hue and cry and outcry. Now, if you look at all these cities and the pressure that they're having because of its finite piece of land, but there's more and more people who are coming into the cities and they're seeking services and they need things. They will need accommodation. They will need transport. They will need access to markets. Most importantly, city fathers don't see this, but city planners see this. They need recreational services. They need places where they can go and relax and unwind. You need green spaces. We're not seeing the development of green spaces, for example, in the cities. We are seeing city fathers of Nairobi complaining because people are going to sit at that roundabout at Garden City. And they're saying, this can cause accidents, Bwana. Why are people sleeping on that grass?
In fact, the conversation that dominates that particular space is we don't have sufficient housing. We need, so that you're justifying those shoddy little flats that these guys keep putting up. We don't have enough housing.
Yes. We need more and more housing.
Yeah, which also means we then need to take land that was purposed for something else so that we can build more houses.
And you ask yourself, so what is the way forward? What is the solution to this? Is the Afri-Cities Conference discussing this, or is it not?
Well, I mean, the different conversations that are popping up. I mean, of course, now, as we talked about in the last hour, one that surrounds whether Nairobi then ought to be moved. But, you know, a lot of these things, as you think about them, comes about with the thinking of the individuals then who are the vanguards of some of these things. When we talk about recreation and how important it is in the life of societies and communities, then are you having people who are thinking in that direction to say it is absolutely important that you factor in some of these things when you come to planning and designing a city? Now, are we having the conversations around the SDGs and before those, the MDGs, looking at where are we looking towards in terms of sustainability of cities? Where are we looking to in making sure some of these amenities are put in place? Is the thinking all encompassing? Because the conversation may be around sewerage and sanitation. It may be around provision of water and other amenities, but it must be holistic in nature, that all of these things are taken into consideration in addition to recreation and socialization of communities. Because how often does that leave the conversation? Green spaces, one thing that you often advocate for, green spaces, recreational spaces. There are many countries we look at today when you walk into the middle of a city and there's a free gym, for example, for people to use, or that there are water fountains with clean water, recycled clean water that anybody can have access to drink. Are we of age to start thinking or start moving towards these sustainable cities? And if that is not where the conversation is going in this day and age, then there's a problem.
Indeed. Let's bring in the Cabinet Secretary for Devolution, the Cabinet Secretary for Defense, who is also the Cabinet Secretary for Devolution. Honorable EUGENE WAMALWA joins us over video link. Good morning, Bwana Waziri. Very well, thank you. And thank you very much for speaking to us this morning. You are in Kisumu attending the Afri-Cities Conference, is that right? I think we have an issue, Bwana Waziri, with getting you on the line. Let's see if we can get that sorted shortly, and then we'll get to you. We'll be asking the minister. So we have the pressure, immense pressure on what we have in terms of land and developing cities, and urbanization is increasing. People who are moving from rural areas into urban spaces. And then we've also talked about expected to be living in urban centers, in urban areas in the next 5-10 years is still going to be rising. So what is our solution to that, City?
You know, the solution is to take our urban planners seriously. because this isn't magic. This is something that is doable. So long as you have an example of cities that actually function, then it tells you that it is possible for us to find a solution. Because if other people have done it, all that shows that it can be done. Now, we then also need to deal with why it is that this thing that can be done and has been given as an example and has been exemplified by other cities, why it is that we aren't getting ours done. And in thinking about that, we need to consider this very, very concept of what a city is, how you ensure that this devolution that we have in this country works for us and that it helps us solve this very, very problem that we are discussing. That is my view. But you see, it's my view. But the truth of the matter is that if we called in experts, again, I refer to the urban planners, people who have a very, very clear understanding of how these things ought to be done, I am sure they'd be able to open this discussion up and tell us about things that I have never even imagined or thought about. Because, again, this is what they know and this is how they know it. We may be thinking that Nakuru ought to be, well, with the inclusion of Nakuru as a city, that we moved forward. For all you know, we could have 10 other cities in this particular country. And the moment you have those cities, it means that the services that accompany the entity that we're referring to as a city will be available right across the country. Mm-hmm. So even as we talk of devolution and the need for us to understand how that ought to benefit us, the reality of what we're discussing here will become more apparent. So that people don't even have to move from where they are. The very things that they're coming to look for in Nairobi will be available to a city literally next to them. So this need will be stemmed. It will be stopped at its very, very genesis, and from its very, very roots. Now, that is my view.
It's a strong view, and it makes sense in terms of talking about what devolution is doing and what devolution is bringing. Now, as we see the expansion of urban areas or the development of urban areas in these counties, in the county headquarters, because county headquarters, we have got to admit, where county headquarters have grown, we are actually seeing a difference. We are seeing a difference in terms of how people are moving and developing in those areas. There's a difference, and it's what it's creating.
Well, I mean, look, we said it. If you are moving administrative offices from one place to another, or if you're even creating the opportunity for them to exist in a different space, you inadvertently then provide other, or almost automatically provide other amenities that will be used in that area. You can imagine, look, take your pick around the country when devolution took place and counties then had to establish county offices. There were so many things that came along with that. That meant that people were working. That meant that you had to put up other buildings. That meant that you increased capacity for people then to get jobs. People moved back to that area because they wanted to then be able to work from their home counties. It's almost an automatic domino effect that you put up or you start to develop in a particular area. You will then invite other infrastructure. You will invite other economic activity. You will now make sure that this place becomes one that can be used for so many other things. You will build it naturally. But the thing that needs to happen is the decision and the plan to be able to move into that direction. Without that, then I think you will then have dormant pieces of land around the country that are not being used for anything. It just mushrooms by virtue of the fact that you make the decision to move in that direction. And I think once you make the step, you can't really go back.
You know what perhaps exemplifies what we're discussing the easiest in some of the developed countries, cities or towns that are referred to as university towns.
Yes.
Meaning, yes, you have the structure of a town, you have the unit, but what makes it function is the population that you find within the institution that we're referring to as the university. Because you build the university, there are so many things that happen. One, that population will demand certain services. Now, because of the entity that existed there as a town, to meet this need, there are things that will automatically happen. There'll be commercial things, there'll be activities. Now, this will, of necessity, as you say correctly, grow the place. Now, even changing the status of a small shopping center to a township or a town, if you again provide the infrastructure and the services that go along with it, you will change the status. And this migration that we keep talking about, as again, will be stemmed. People move because they believe opportunities will be found to the places that they want to move to. But in doing what we're saying, you will have taken the opportunity to their very doorstep. And I'm going back to what I said. This is what devolution purposed to do. But then there are structures, there are activities, there are services that supposedly were supposed to accompany it. Now, if it hasn't, then the movement that we keep talking about and we're reading about earlier on will not be stemmed. However, if it actually exists, not at the county level also, but to the sub-county level, then the truth of the matter is that the growth that we speak of will not be in one big place called Nairobi. No. The growth will be in all the 47 counties that we have in the country.
Well, of course. I mean, you will invite the simultaneous growth
Yes.
around the country. Look, are we talking about an lack of capacity to realize this very thing that we are saying here? That we understand what can be done if these things actually happen. Now, in terms of actually implementing whatever design plan could come, then it becomes difficult. Save devolution, which now opened up about maybe 9 years ago here. Did we see that there was this thrust towards opening up other parts of the country?
No, that
Yes, we did.
Yes.
Let's bring in the CS, who's now joining us on the line. CS, good morning. I think, sorry, we had a technical issue earlier.
Morning. I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, loud and clear, and we can see you as well. Thank you very much for joining
thank
us in the Situation Room. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. You're speaking to us, of course, from Kisumu, where the AfriCities Conference is taking place. We are talking about the future of African cities in the face of increasing urbanization and, of course, diminishing land and other resources. That's a conversation that we started having here at 7 o'clock, just looking at Nairobi. And even now, I'm sure you've been hearing what we are saying. Even with devolution now increasing or growing urban spaces across the country, especially at the county headquarters, there is now pressure, not just in Nairobi, but there's pressure in other places which were just small municipalities or small towns, now getting more and more people moving into those areas. Is that what you're discussing in Kisumu?
Yes, this is what we're discussing, and we are very honored as Kenya and Kisumu County to be the first to host AfriCities in an intermediary city. We last hosted these in 2006, but that was in Nairobi, just the way it's been done in other capitals of Africa. But we are looking at intermediary cities as really the future of Africa. The experts are telling us this is where over 60% of our population will be by 2050. So we have to prepare, even as our populations grow and we strain our amenities, social amenities. We must plan ahead and plan for green, smart cities. And these are the issues that we are discussing here, and also sharing experiences with our counterparts from other cities in Africa and the world.
You know, but CS, even as we look at all this, we are coming to every conversation we're having comes back to planning and the plans that the urban planners have had in place, and then the implementation of those plans, and especially enforcement. Do you see a challenge? I mean, you've been a CS for devolution for a number of years, even before the president moved you into defense and then asked you to come back and be the caretaker CS for devolution. When you have all these conversations, do you see an issue of planning and enforcement and implementation?
Yes, it is actually at the center of this discourse. And we have to really plan ahead and look at how rapid our populations are growing. And also the rural-urban migration is increasing. People believing they will get better services and better opportunities in our growing cities and urban centers. So we need to focus on planning and also see how we can deal with the issues of corruption, because this is one area that we must focus on. Because even as we have the best plans, now implementation is the challenge, and we need to see how to strengthen that. But as national government, we are also working closely with our county governments within the framework of the Big Four agenda. And some of the two main pillars, that of housing and that of health. So you find that as these populations grow, they will need more housing in our cities. They will need a better water supply and access to health facilities. So we're working on increasing access in health as well as housing, and also replanning our cities. A city like Kisumu has the old estates that had these small houses, but with the idea of now putting up affordable houses, we have high-rise buildings coming up, and in an estate where we're accommodating, say, about 100 families, with the flattening of these old houses and putting up high-rise ones, well planned, we can accommodate over 1,000 families. And this is happening not just in Kisumu here, in Nairobi, we have new estates coming up. You go to Nakuru, and we must thank our counties working closely with us on this.
CS, even as you talk about some of these things, we are looking at essentially a lot of work that needs to be done to replan or even to establish plans to take off the pressure off of some of the cities within the country, for example, that have quite a lot of it, Nairobi being one of them. What would you say is the biggest challenge to be able to get this ball moving?
I think the biggest challenge facing most of our towns and cities is the water problem. We have a huge deficit. In a city like Nairobi, the population is growing very fast, but we still have the same old water infrastructure. And that's why we have new projects like the tunnel. We're bringing in water from Murang'a. This is going to boost the water supply to Nairobi. When you go to a city like Mombasa, there's a huge water deficit. And that's why we have new projects like the Mwache Dam we are putting up, as well as Muzima too, so that we can have more water coming to these cities to serve the ever-growing populations. The other issue is the issue of the health infrastructure. We are happy that also as KDF, we have contributed greatly to putting up new hospitals, as well as expanding the existing ones to be able to offer more services. So more needs to be done, actually, to deal with the health crisis, the water shortage crisis, as our populations grow. I regard this as most of the most challenging situations facing us.
Bonasias, do you think that if devolution was functioning as it ought to, that this discussion we are having could easily be pointed towards how devolution can actually help resolve these issues that we keep talking about with regards to migrations of people moving from wherever they are to the big city of Nairobi?
It is contributing greatly. You will be surprised that it has actually stemmed some of this migration because we have counties that are doing very well now. We had a lot of people coming all the way, say, from Mandera to Nairobi, because if you had a kidney problem, you can't find the dialysis machine in Mandera. You must come to Nairobi, live with your relatives in Isili, and be able to go to Kenyatta National Hospital maybe twice a week to access dialysis. But as we speak now, Governor Ali Roba has done very well. We have a level 4 hospital in Mandera where dialysis can be done now. So imagine the number of people who are no longer congesting Kenyatta National Hospital and are able to get the services. CT scans could not be found anywhere, say, in the North Rift. People from Turkana, people from West Pokot, Trans Nzoia would come all the way to Moi Referral Hospital in Eldred. But now with devolution, these facilities are offering world-class health services in our counties, and this is also stemming the migration to our cities. And it's also creating opportunities for professionals to go back to serve in their county governments because there are great opportunities there. And these counties are actually becoming new engines for socio-economic transformation of our country. As I said during my opening speech, I said, this is the real bottom up.
You had to throw that one in there, didn't you? It's 8:30. Waziri, let's take a quick break. We want to take a look at the traffic situation. We know that there are some matatu operators in Westlands who've been they have downed their tools.
Indeed.
Now, what do you call that? Their tools
Exactly,
are
their tools, they're the vehicles.
their tools are steering wheels. What have they done?
They've stopped others from
Okay.
using the road.
Let's find out the situation there as well as take a look at the weather forecast. We're having a conversation with the Cabinet Secretary for Defence and Devolution, the Honourable EUGENE WAMALWA, who is at the Afri-Cities Conference in Kisumu. And we're talking about the future of African cities in the face of increasing urbanization, diminishing land and other resources. What is the way forward for our cities, our main cities, our intermediary cities, also looking at other urban areas like municipalities and towns? Good morning, Kenya's biggest conversation. We'll be back shortly.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
We have with us online is the Cabinet Secretary for Defence and Devolution, the Honourable EUGENE WAMALWA, who's joining us from Kisumu, where he's attending the Afri-Cities Conference. The future of African cities in the face of increasing urbanization, diminishing land and other resources. Waziri, as you were speaking, you talked about the kind of things that bring pressure to populations in urban areas, and you mentioned land, you mentioned water, and especially water sources. But there's something that we don't hear from leaders, and particularly even politicians, even right now as governors are campaigning, they don't mention sanitation. And yet it's assumed maybe that when you talk about water, you are also including sanitation, but that should not be necessarily the case. I think sanitation should be, spoken about as a standalone issue. Because sanitation, for example, in Nairobi is a big challenge, in Kisumu as well. The issue of sewage sanitation and non-sewage sanitation. I know, for example, that the Kisumu Water and Sewerage Company is working with people in the private sector, for example, to look at how to increase non-sewage sanitation in the slum areas, which are congested and they don't have access to sewer sanitation. Container-based sanitation is an issue. But what's the future? What's the conversation like when it comes to sanitation, not just water?
I think we should start by changing the conversation to ensure that we don't just talk about water, but we talk about water and sanitation. And I think President Uhuru Kenyatta has been very clear about this. And by creating the Ministry of Water and Sanitation, we are really raising sanitation to the same level of focus as water. And for many years, I think we have invested more in water and left sanitation behind. As we stand now, when you look at the national water coverage, we are almost at 60%, and I think we are targeting to move to 80% by 2030. And when you look at sanitation, it's left far behind. We are at about 22% in terms of national coverage. So this is an area that we need to focus on, and for all the water projects that we are doing, sanitation must be given equal attention so that we don't leave it far behind.
Sure, yes, but if we think about sanitation and we think about just digging up the ground and putting the sanitation pipes, we may not reach there in good time. Whereas today there are people who don't have access to sanitation services. Is there a conversation about thinking of sanitation not just in the sewer pipes, but non-sewer sanitation?
I think for now, we must accept that we have a challenge because of the land issues. When you look at what's happening in Nairobi, there's been a lot of encroachment. Our planners have it all in place. It is known where the sewer line should be laid. But because of corruption, particularly at City Hall, you find that most of this land has been encroached on. So when the government moves in to move these people, then there's an uproar that, government is demolishing people's houses and messing up families during COVID period. But unless we do this, unless we bite the bullet now, the problem will only grow as the population grows.
Well, Waziri, I am happy to hear what you've said, But do you really think the problem is that the government moves people out, or the government doesn't communicate effectively what it is they want to do and how it is they have looked into the welfare of those they want to move? Because if what people see are bulldozers coming to greet you when you are leaving your house, or city askaris, or some sort of enforcement agency, they will react in a certain way. The reaction is not difficult to foretell. But if there's sufficient communication, this aspect of public participation, if it's adequately addressed, surely some of these things that the government plans and purports to do will be done with a lot less resistance. That's my thought. What are your thoughts?
I think government is not that insensitive, because notices have been served, but you find a problem where someone has bought a plot from another person who has sold to another person, and without them knowing that they are encroaching on public land, and when the bulldozers come, there's a hue and cry about people being displaced. But unless we move people and get this infrastructure in place, then we'll never realize the potential of the smart and green cities we are talking about. If we did not move people out of the thicker highway, and I know it made a lot of problems for the then coalition government. In fact, the Right Honorable Raila Odinga became very unpopular at the time. But, we had to bite the bullet, demolish very prestigious houses. That's how thick a superhighway was built. Here in Kisumu, if you came here about 6 years, actually 10 years ago, you don't believe the city of Kisumu is what it is today, if you're told. But Governor Nyang'nyong had to bite the bullet. They had to bring down structures. The water frontage now, when you go to the lake, we have a beautiful city that is facing a beautiful lake. When a few years ago we had slums all over, people encroaching on what was public land. But decisions have to be made, as unpopular as they are, as long as they are right, to give us these cities that we desire.
Going further beyond that, I mean, even with this conference that's taking place this week, we are served with examples of many countries who are doing certain things. As you say, it may be unpopular, but it is right to be able to get things flowing. Is there a case then, looking locally, to essentially move administrations or decentralize operations in the country to take off this pressure on some areas that you've so clearly talked about right now, to remove the pressure on some of these areas and allow things to flow smoothly? Is there a case for the decentralization of operations?
I think there is a case, and the late Magufuli did it in Tanzania. When they were talking about moving the capital from Dar to the Roma, no one believed it could happen. But it has happened. And even in Kenya, it can happen. We can move our capital to Nakuru, which is the center of Kenya, and our newest city. That will bring a huge difference in terms of the congestion we have here, taking away the administrative district out of Nairobi. It can happen, but it must be a bold decision that, of course, with public participation, we need the support and goodwill of all Kenyans.
Waziri, you've said Nakuru being the center of Kenya, and I'm sure there are many people who will ask, what did he just say? Is it Nakuru? Is it Isiolo?
Well, you can look at Isiolo. You can look at Nakuru. These are areas where we can move to, and Isiolo has an international airport, enough land, wonderful weather, a beautiful road now. You can drive from Nairobi to Isiolo very easily. So we need to be bold, to move bold into the future, to make bold decisions that can change some of the challenges we are facing now. It can happen.
But yes, I'm in full agreement, Waziri. It can definitely happen. But do the services that often follow these designations, are they there? If, say, for instance, I want to go to Nairobi, to Nakuru or Isiolo, am I going to find a level 6 hospital? Am I going to find the sort of things that I expect of a city in these very places? And if they aren't there, am I guaranteed that within a time frame that I can understand, that they will actually be there, so that my movement is supported by reality?
Yes, it can happen. As I tell you now, we have an international airport in Isiolo. 20 years ago, that would have been unimaginable. Just 3 weeks ago, we were out there with the president, with the CDF, opening an ultra-modern hospital in Isiolo. It is the best facility to be built in northern Kenya since independence. So the services you're getting in Nairobi, you can actually get them in Isiolo now. And these are some of the things that we're saying can be done if we're bold enough to think boldly into the future. Yes.
I can almost hear, even before maybe some of these plans are put in place, or even the discussions had on a deeper level, I can almost hear immediately that one of the issues we'll be told about is that funding will not be adequate. We don't have enough to make it or to design it in the manner in which we would want when we're looking at countrywide design and plan implementation. So where then do partnerships could be with other governments or private facilities? Where do PPPs fall here? Would that be in the thought process, or is this kind of a go it alone kind of thing, and let's see where we are in 20 years?
I think this is where the PPPs fall, and President Uhuru Kenyatta has been very keen on developing this new area. Years ago, we started talking about PPPs, but it was a small unit at our national treasury. But now it is expanded, and we can see the expressway as the first successful PPP, executed in our country, in our region, and in Africa, I must say. So it can happen. And there are huge opportunities there. If you look at the Konza Techno City, the potential is there. You look at Isiolo, you look at Nanyuki, the rail line that is connected now. We have people thinking of moving in these regions. So as government, our role will just be to ensure we put in place the necessary infrastructure and we create a conducive environment for the private sector to come in and invest.
One of the things that has been said about the northern part of the country is the great potential that they have for ranchers and for ensuring that that industry that is largely centered around, say, Athi River, actually grows there. Now, it's also a region that is constantly battling perennial drought. Now, if we were to ask, for instance, say, an environment that makes it feasible and makes it possible for certain things to happen, what would you say has been done for that region so that this whole enterprise, that in itself is an enterprise that Kenyans acknowledge is a growth industry and one that has huger potential than we currently have, what would you say has been done to ensure that this region grows that particular industry that it already has as the bedrock of its economy?
I can tell you many years ago, Northeastern Province, NEP as it was known, meant another thing, nothing except problems. That's what NEP stood for. But now with devolution, what we see it differently. NEP now means nothing except potential. There's huge potential in northern Kenya. And probably when at independence, we saw these as low potential areas where, according to session paper number 10 of 1965, would be avoided so that we invest in high potential areas. We are realizing that this region has huge potential. When you're talking of food security, all they need is water, and we're building dams there. There are dams that are coming up. One of the dams that will soon be coming up is Bute Dam in Wajir. It will have a huge impact on the potential of creating new bread baskets there. When you go to areas like Ukambani, where there's been hunger and drought and famine all the years, where people are relying on molio, relief food, Twake Dam is coming up, and the impact that will have will be felt for many years to come, to turn Ukambani from a food deficit area to a food surplus area. And it's not just that. When you go to a place like Marsabit, We have a brand new dam, Forole Dam, that we just completed, and Urum Dam in Turkana, as well as in West Pokot. So we're focusing on seeing how to deal with the issue of drought, water shortage, and the other issue is infrastructure. The roads that are being built now, as I said, from Nairobi to Isiolo, you can drive very comfortably. And now we have a road going all the way from Isiolo, going all the way to Wajir. Then from Nairobi to Garissa, we have a road from Garissa to Modogashe. That road is being put in place that will go all the way to Mandera. So once we have the infrastructure in place, we have these regions connected to the national grid so that they have electricity. Then we have roads, we have electricity, we have water. That's the infrastructure required to make the place now attractive to the private sector and investors to go in and invest. So the potential is there, and the commitment from the government is there to ensure we improve on security, we put in infrastructure, and we create a conducive environment for investors. And devolution has contributed greatly to this. Fast tarmac roads are being seen in Wajir and Mandera since independence. World-class health facilities are in place that had never been seen since independence. So people are beginning to look north. These are areas that we've now discovered oil. There are great minerals there. The biggest windmills in Africa have been built in this, in Loyangalani, Turkana. So we are not just seeing this as a nothing except problems region. It's a nothing except potential reason. Now it's how we tap into that potential. And I believe as the Minister for Devolution, we have made a big contribution towards that.
This man has been Minister for Water and Sanitation. When he talks about dams, he knows those projects. He's been Minister for Devolution and Regional Development, so he knows about these things that he's talking about. However, Bonacius, there is a piece of legislation, the Urban Areas and Cities Act of 2011, that was amended again in 2019, that looks at how to classify these urban areas, the cities, municipalities, and towns. People have complained about the implementation of this piece of legislation, especially from the planning perspective. So yes, we know that a city is a place that has been designated, a certain population will qualify a place to be designated a city, or a municipality, or a town, or markets and such. But there's a complaint that governors are actually not taking in the input from planners and urban planners in development of, let's say, even in CIDPs and in the development of these urban areas. You must have heard this complaint, I'm sure.
Yes, and we want to urge the governors to work with their planners, because these are experts in whom we have invested a lot in terms of training. They know best what needs to be done, and I believe if we abide by those plans and implement them, we will avoid most of the problems that we have. The other thing that we are also doing is, creating new municipalities, and this is also going to improve services for our people. There are some governors who have done very well. There are those, again, who have not because of local politics, resistance. People don't want to be part of the municipality. They don't want to pay rates or whatever. But they are ignoring the bigger picture, the bigger benefits that come with it. Because when you look at some of the plans that we have, like the Kenya Urban Support Program, like the Sustainable Urban Economic Development, the SWED program, once you have them properly planned municipalities, you'll attract more investors. You'll attract more funding. And they're missing out on this. There are quite a number of towns that have benefited because of this. Yes.
Waziri, do we run the risk? I mean, you've mentioned this word. I don't know how many times you can count it in this time that we've spoken about planning. And then the implementation then comes as a result of it. But if you look at countries around the world who have successful plans that are still in that planning process, but are implementing at the same time, they've been hugely successful. China being one of them, that they're probably in the second to last tranche of their 60-year plan, and they broke it up into 5 years of, 12 years of 5 years each, 12 batches of 5 years each. But within those plans, it was very clear what they were going to do. And it was very clear within which regions, for example, that they were going to execute these things. Wouldn't it be then the prudent thing to do here for the country to say, these are the areas in which need attention. This is what we are going to do between 2022 and 2027, for example. Do such things exist? And then is there the following implementation? Because, my high school coach used to say potential is just potential until you put your boots to the ground. What happens then after that to say it's a plan, it's great, but can we actually see the result of it?
Yes, I think the plans are in place, and we have best laid plans as we speak. I mean, we have a Vision 2030 in place, and we have 8 years to go. So we have our planners now looking beyond 2030, looking at the EU Agenda 2063, looking into the future. So we must plan ahead. What I would say is that it's not for the lack of plans, but I think the issue is really the implementation part of it. And I think that is where we need to pull up our socks. But otherwise, we have the best of plans in place.
And finally, as we conclude the conversation, let's look at the example or the experience of Nairobi with the county government and the national government coming in through the NMS. Now, we are talking about cities being classified across the country. There are intermediary cities such as Kisumu, Nakuru. Do you think there is justification to say that administration of cities should be both by local county government, and the national government should also have some say or some role?
No, not necessarily. I think for us really is to give support, infrastructural support to the county governments, to also do capacity building and technical support to give them the capacity. But with devolution, we have devolved this power for, the people themselves to sit in their localities, look at their priorities, plan, what they want to do with the resources that come to them, and have their CIDPs in place. But what we'd like to see more is the element of public participation being done effectively, participatory budgeting processes that are open, transparent, and accountable. These are some of the things lacking in some of our counties. But the future of devolution lies in the counties being empowered to do their part. Yes.
Finally, just tell us what's expected to be happening in the coming days at the AfriCities conference. So it was launched yesterday. You're there. You're going to be there for the entire duration of the AfriCities conference. What are the planned activities?
Actually, we're in our third day. Right. It was launched the day before yesterday.
Yes.
And today we're on our third day, and we have a lot going on. We have breakaway stations on my part and the part of our colleagues from national government. We have a lot of bilateral, because there are a lot of countries who have come here to also share experiences and learn from us. Like from these show, I have about 4 lined up bilaterals with Egypt, Cameroon, Sudan. There are quite a number who want to look at how decentralization has worked in Kenya and how devolution can be replicated elsewhere in Africa, so that we grow our intermediary cities, and we turn them into engines of socio-economic transformation of our country and our continent.
Asante sana. Thank you very much for speaking to us, Bwana CS. We'll let you go and get into the series of meetings. Thank you for shedding light on what's happening at the AfriCities conference, and also the thinking of the national government in terms of development of our urban areas. Have a lovely day.